Live from Radio Row at Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans, I'm Roy Kessel for Sports Philanthropy Network, and we're very excited to have with us today Nicole Roberts. Nicole is in charge of Leigh Steinberg's Brain Health Summit, and Nicole does an amazing job every year sourcing panelists, interviewing people, and making sure that she can put together some of the best and brightest minds in the area of brain health. So Nicole, thank you so much for making time to be with us today.
Of course, thank you.
We're excited to listen to these panels tomorrow. We've had many of the panelists join us today on Radio Row, and we've been able to get a little preview of what they're going to be talking about and what that's going to look like. But what I'm really interested in is you've been involved in this area now for at least over 15 years that I know of. Mm-hmm. And what got you excited about being part of the concussion and brain health area?
Well, admittedly, so my background is in neuroscience. So I've sort of gravitated in the space, since college. But I'm technically a doctor of public health. So I don't think of just concussion or just injury. For me, it's really about broader, like neuroscience, behavior, things of that nature. And I did not intend to work in sport at all. In fact, I really still don't work in sport except for this. But I happened to meet Leigh many, many years ago at the UN on World Brain Day, and we just got along. And then we realized, of all silly things, and you can relate, we have the same birthday.
All three of us.
All three of us have the same birthday.
And we didn't get our birthday triplet picture this year.
Oh, we didn't.
We'll have to do that tomorrow.
I think Leigh's still here, maybe. Anyway, we realized we had the same birthday. It was silly as could be. And we were like, well, then we're friends, right? That's all you need. And we then had more conversations that really led to me understanding his crisis of conscience, as he talks about it. And that is in the 80s, he started seeing injuries in his clients. And, he said, these are our clients, our friends, our peers, and we need to have honest conversations about what's going on, no matter what kind of injury it is. And so we, fast forward, he said, how can we do something now? And he so generously offered up time during his annual party to talk about these tough issues. And so it started 12 years ago, and those days were harder. The conversations were harder. They were really about injury, trauma, subconcussive hits. And luckily, between changes in the league and advances in science, the conversations now are much more joyful and exciting, talking about prevention, cures, and then this year, because we are in the home of jazz, our theme is music and the mind, and we're really exploring things like music and alternative therapies for healing.
Well, as you said, there's been this evolution, right? When I started a company called Sports Brain with my partner Bob, this is about 2009, and we looked at the research, we looked at the data coming out of the NFL, and there were still teams as recently as 2010-11 that were reporting zero, that's none, zero concussions for an entire season of preseason practices, games, everything that they do, right? And we know that that's an absurd concept.
Impossibility.
And yet, that was a given, right? People were really reluctant to report the numbers. Yeah. There was a lot of negative pressure, we'll call it, to underreport the numbers. We saw the report that just came out this week that concussions are down quite a bit. I think the number I saw was like 187, which was the lowest it's been since like 2015 or something. That's still, is a large number, right, when they're there. And I think that there's still many, many concussions that are not being diagnosed or reported from observation levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the same time, we often don't see those real hits because they're subconcussive. It's the repeated injury over and over, and your brain doesn't have time to heal. And so, there's a lot more going on there than just one big hard hit and you put the check mark and go, oh, there's one. At the same time, as I said, I am a bit more hopeful because there have been changes in the league, and I do want to give credit where credit's due. But beyond that, we're seeing all these advancements in knowledge, in science, and we're seeing guys, self-reporting is so much better. And so you've got subjective measures and objective measures. But that subjectivity is also important because a lot of these younger players, compared to, say, guys in like the 80s or right, they know they have a life, a future ahead of them, and it's no different than if you tear, the same knee over and over and over. You can only have surgery so many times before it's not as stable as it was. You're not as quick as you were. And so protecting your body includes protecting your brain. It is just a part of our body.
Well, one of the things that's always been disturbing, you talked about the subconcussive blows, right? There's never been a great way to measure that. It don't seem to be any good studies that show X number of G's of force over
Sure.
the course of your lifetime correlates to this. It's obviously more hits are worse than less hits, more
Yep.
concussions are worse than less concussions, but we don't really, there's no bright line test, and people are different. And I think you hit it on the head, which is many of these injuries aren't being allowed, bad pun, right? Hit on the head.
Yeah,
But
I liked it.
the many of these injuries aren't being allowed to heal.
Right.
And so I always use the analogy when I spoke at parent conferences or coaching conventions about concussions, that you wouldn't think of sending a kid with a broken ankle back on the field and say, hey, suck it up, keep running. Like, we
Right.
know that's absurd. We know that you could do permanent damage to your ankle or your
Absolutely.
knee or whatever
Yeah.
it was if you go and keep exercising on it.
We see in Little League, right? We see pitch counts for kids as young as 11 and 12 years old. It's made to protect their shoulder because we want them to grow into an athlete when they're older. We can't destroy their bodies when they're still developing. And it's no different with our brains. It is another organ in our body. And so it has to be protected. And it's not to change sport. We love sport, right? We love American football. It's about making it safer, to your exact point, which is if someone injured another part of the body, you wouldn't say, suck it up, go back in there, knowing they could be out for multiple games after that. It's about treating people where they are with the injury that they have.
And it's even worse than that, I say, because, okay, I know I need to put a cast on that broken ankle. I know I need to sit it out for 4 weeks. Kids grow quickly, so 4 weeks is usually enough, but 4 to 6 weeks,
Sure.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to take the cast off. But you wouldn't think, even when you take the cast off, protocol would not be go run at full speed as soon as you take the cast off. You're going
Right.
to go through some kind of rehab process.
Yep.
And yet, when we get people with brain injuries or concussions, too frequently, oh, you passed the baseline test? Okay,
Go back
now go full speed
Yeah.
ahead, right? And they don't do that graduated return to play protocol, and
Exactly.
they don't have somebody really monitoring it, because I've seen people put kids through that return to play progression, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 consecutive days, but they're not really monitoring
Right.
that they're passing each of those steps. They're just anointing,
Yep.
okay, you pass step 1 each day.
Yeah, and we see the same with return to learn, depending on the age of the injured party. But we see that through elementary school, middle school, high school, all the way up to college athletics. That there's not only the component that's the physicality part, right? That's the return to play. There's the return to learn, reading, a lot of those activities, homework. Like, it takes so much mental energy that we're actually putting a lot of stress on our brains and bodies. And people don't often think about those long-term repercussions of an injury.
And that return to learn is so interesting, because we talked about it with an earlier panel. If I break my wrist and I come to school with a cast, everybody was like giving me
Aw.
sympathy, signing a cast,
Yeah.
right? The teacher's like, oh, you need some extra time on your test, no problem. But if I have an brain injury and I ask for an accommodation, it's like you're a slacker, you're a malingerer, you're not really hurt. It's an invisible injury.
Yeah.
And again, in fairness, from the outside, there's no reasonable way an educator is going to know, like, okay, what accommodation does Nicole really need,
Right.
and what is she just trying to game the system for?
Sure, and it's also hard for the person themselves to know, right? Because you don't often realize, and some of us, I'm very guilty, I'll be reading something and I kind of space out, and I'm like, I just read a whole paragraph and I have no idea what was in it. Like, I need to go back, right? My brain went somewhere else. When that's happening, in especially like an education setting, it's so hard. How do you assign? Is it that I'm just spaced out? Is it that I've got brain fog? Is there something really happening here? Like, it's so hard in real time to know is this related to injury, or is this just, I'm having a bad day? And so it
Or is it something else like ADHD? Is it
Yeah, exactly.
any number of things, right? There's a lot of people, like we're in an environment with a huge amount of noise, light,
I have ADHD
distraction,
right now.
right?
Only now.
and I think that one of the things that many people struggle with is when you've got all of that external stimulus, it's hard to stay focused. And that takes its toll on somebody's brain in a way that we can't
Very much so.
measure. So you might be all well and good and feeling good for the first hour or 2 hours you're in Radio Row or in this kind of environment, but that doesn't mean you can be here from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and perform at peak levels.
Absolutely not in my case. Absolutely not. And you're right. Yeah. These are very unique circumstances.
So as you look ahead to tomorrow, to the Brain Health Summit, tell us a little bit about the panels that you've assembled.
Well, you've interviewed most of them, which is wonderful. So we have 2 panels tomorrow. The first is the opening Brain Health Summit panel. It's a bit more academic. We have a strong presence from Tulane, because obviously we're in New Orleans, and they have 3 distinct brain centers. And so they are the perfect sort of host city partner. And so that one's a bit more academic, looking at the power of sport to move science forward, to advocate for health, and then also to talk about injury. We have Al Smith on the panel, who's representing not only former players but the NFL Alumni Association Health Division. And so, talking about it from the player perspective, we've got neuroscientists talking about it from the research perspective. And then we have a couple of really cool people talking about it from like a psychedelic sort of alternative therapy space, and really serving as those guardrails for what is real and what is snake oil, which there's a lot of in the brain space. And then the second panel we're calling the Health Innovation Panel. And that one builds on the first, but it's a lot more fun in the sense that people have these really cool technologies. They're doing these incredible things with neuroplasticity, retraining the brain, thinking about elite performance. And so the first one's really, deep into the science. The second one is like, where are we going?
And I love that innovation. One of the things we spoke about with some of the panelists that were with us last year as well, they were talking about the pace of innovation and the pace of change in this brain health space, right?
Yes.
So you and I met originally 15 or so years ago at the Super Bowl in New York. But when you look at what's going on, things have changed a lot in that 15-year window. And every year, the pace of innovation, the pace of change is accelerating.
Speeds up, yep. That's exactly right. Which I also think is why it's so wonderful to be able to do this annually, because it also serves for us as like a checkpoint, right? And that's why I said it's so fun in a way to look back and think about those early years, the conversations we were having. It felt like there was more like going, concussions are real, we have to take this seriously. Whereas now it's like, we've come full circle, this is accepted. How do we get better? How do we enhance performance? And not just for someone who's been injured, but for the average person, right? Because so much of what we're learning in the sports space, where some of those research dollars are, they can be applied to anyone. And so it is really fun to do this every year and sort of build upon the previous years.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much for joining
you.
us. We appreciate the time and effort you put into this. I know
Thank
you
you.
work really hard throughout the year to identify amazing speakers.
Labor of love.
And labor of love, but it's something that you're passionate about and something that you've seen the impact it's had. I mean, just being at Leigh's party and seeing the focus of brain health and making that an annual topic of conversation for people beyond just the academic community or beyond the athletic training community, to whereas people are really understanding this impacts all of us. In a sense, NFL players may be guinea pigs, that certain things are tested on them in helmets and the infrastructure and treatment protocols and things like that. But that helps all of us because concussions happen everywhere, in car accidents, slip and falls, kitchens, offices. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
And for all of our viewers and listeners, this is Roy Kessel signing off for Sports Philanthropy Network, live from Radio Row at Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans, reminding you to live generously.
There you go.